4 minutes until showtime. 3 minutes until showtime. 2 minutes until showtime. 1 minute until showtime. 'Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Insurrection, obstruction, indictments, civilly liable for sexual abuse. The one man responsible for all that could be sitting in a prison cell on election day and still be elected commander-in-chief for these United States. That man is beholden to Putin, weakened NATO the last time around, and is currently tying himself to wealthy Saudi oil money. He enriched himself when government stayed at his properties. He campaigned on wanting to use government to go after his political rivals and wants to expand executive power. If Donald Trump is re-elected, our nation is lost. So let's roll up our sleeves, get to work, and tell the MAGA folks no more before it's too late.
Welcome back to Liberal Dan Radio. Talk from the left, that's right. This is your host, Dan Zimmerman, coming at you from New Orleans, Louisiana. To join the conversation, it's area code 914-803-4131. That's 914-803-4131. You can always also join us at the chat room on YouTube. Just go to liberaldanradio.com to get there. That's liberaldanradio.com. We'll bring you right to the YouTube channel. If you're listening on Blog Talk Radio, just come on over here. We like to just use one chat room if possible. If you're listening after the live broadcast, you could always leave your comments, questions, concerns, etc. over on the show thread at liberaldan.com, over at facebook.com/liberaldanradio, at liberaldanradio on YouTube, and here, or at liberaldanradio on Twitter, and on the episode thread on YouTube as well, or just go to liberaldanradio.com. Please remember, if you haven't done so, to subscribe to the channel, smash that like button, and after the show, also remember to just interact with other videos, like, share, comment, etc., helping the algorithm to help the channel grow and get to 1,000 so we can monetize and do all the fun things like get members and super chats and all that fun stuff. If you want to super chat me, you got to get me to 1,000, and then we got to get the views up to 4,000 view hours, because when YouTube changed monetization policies, they threw the baby out with the bathwater, unfortunately. So shouts out to everybody in the chat room right now. We got 16 already, which is pretty good, pretty quick start for a Wednesday. We got Steve, P Dubs, Jeff, Jackie, Silly Wonka, Jolie, Andrea, Trucker John, Aaron, who am I missing? Jojo, got my other personality in there as well, Nerdy Dan. So, Bill, Jackie, so yes, several things to talk about. We got Gibson Media. Say, how can you go to Super Chat? The only way to go to a Super Chat is you have to be able to get me to 1,000 subscribers and then get me monetized, which means lots of viewership hours. So that's the only way to do it. That's the only way to get Super Chats. So we need to get that cracking. We need 1,000 subs, and we're at 755. We were at 757. I don't know what happened to 2. Maybe I said something that 2 people didn't like, or maybe 2 accounts got suspended, or maybe 2 sock accounts were inactive for too long, and YouTube just said nope, not anymore. So who knows? But anyway, shouts out to everyone in the chat room. 16 viewers, 13 likes, so 3 people are slacking. Anywho, lots of stuff to talk about. Lots of interesting stuff. About several examples of your federally elected Republican congresspeople, or senators, etc. It's weird how semantics sometimes comes into play when you, a lot of times you say congressman, and a lot of people automatically think you're talking about people in the House of Representatives. But I mean, technically, you have 2 houses of Congress, so a senator is a member of Congress, even though a lot of the times you refer to people in the lower house as congressmen, in the upper house as senator, even though both people are congressmen. They're members of Congress, or congresspersons, congress critters, if you will. So we had several examples of hyper immaturity this week. I think it was all on the same day too, if I'm recalling it correctly. We had the one where the minor one was, and I say minor because it's kind of a matter of he said, she said, where one of the 8, I forget the person who supposedly was elbowed in the ribs or kidney or what have you, but supposedly a Congressman McCarthy, it's weird but fun to say Congressman McCarthy instead of Speaker McCarthy, but Congressman McCarthy walked by one of the 8 people who voted to yeet him from the speakership position, easy for me to say, and walked by him. Apparently it's a small corridor where they were walking, according to Congressman McCarthy, but the other congressperson said that he walked by and elbowed him in the ribs, or elbowed him in the kidney, or whatever. So either you have one congressperson who is taking out a personal vendetta by elbowing somebody in the, oh, excuse me, like doing one of those gags, like, oh, I didn't mean to bump into you, I'm sorry, like, like in high school. Or you have somebody else who is childish and can't understand that an honest, an honest, simple, bump in the hallway is more than what it really was. So either way, one person or the other person is being childish in this whole thing. So hence childish Republican congresspeople. So I mean, what can you say about that? And if you were going to ask me who was more childish, I'd probably put my money on the extreme MAGA person and not McCarthy, even though McCarthy can get that way too. Who knows? I mean, McCarthy was the one who told Trump on January 6th, do you know who you're talking to? Or who yelled at Trump, who showed a modicum of a backbone, and then he lost it a few days later, or 2 weeks later, when he scurried on down to Mar-a-Lago. Let's see. And then, what else you got? You got the situation going on in the U.S. Senate committee hearing. This Senate committee is just the weirdest name. It's like a bizarre collection of things to put together in the committee. But first of all, Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, like, were his parents confused? Could they not decide on Mark or Wayne? So they're like, let's just go with Mark Wayne, because we can't decide on either Mark or Wayne, so we're just going to go with both. Just call him Mark Wayne. And then they probably had to argue, well, are we going to call him Mark? They probably said Mark Wayne because they're like, and they probably had an argument over, well, I wanted to call him Mark Wayne. Well, I want to call him Wayne Mark. Well, if you call him Mark Wayne, they're just going to call him Mark for short. Well, if you call him Wayne Mark, they're just going to call him Wayne for short. They probably flipped a coin and decided on it. Who knows? But him and Teamsters president Sean O'Brien were about to go to fisticuffs over the whole thing, because apparently there was a tweet that Sean O'Brien put out on the shitter or whatever, zitter, and the heated exchange took place over 6 minutes. O'Brien said, name a time or a place. Mark Wayne goes, well, this is a time and a place, so we're two consenting adults, let's go. And he stood up in the middle of a frickin' Senate committee hearing, as I'm sure you all probably knew. And Senator Bernie Sanders had to be the one who had to sit down, you have to sit down. Like, imagine how embarrassing that. Apparently, Mark Wayne Mullen used to fight MMA. And you had to have a 70-year-old Jewish man to hold you back. Like, an old Jewish guy had to hold you back from getting into a fight. I mean, that's kind of sorry. I mean, like, ridiculous. Yeah, I was getting that, P-dubs. And then he went back and cited, we used to have duels and fights way back in the day. Like, it used to be the norm back in the day, to where we would settle things like men. Let's settle things like men. Rah. And, well, Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton. Or, I'm sorry, I should have a mouthful of peanut butter when saying Aaron Burr. But, yeah, and he went back to the whole thing where some guy was caned in the middle he got beat with a cane in the middle of the House floor over a disagreement that they had, because one of them, I think it was an abolitionist, that got caned by somebody who was not an abolitionist from the South, and that was leading up to right before the Civil War. So if that's what he feels that he wants, I mean, we're some people think we're close to that anyway. That we're already to the point of this nation fracturing as it is. But he pretty much is just saying the quiet parts out loud. That we want to be in a position. He wants to be in a place where the people can just get into a physical altercation just on the Senate floor in a Senate committee hearing. Like, this is, again, children. These people are children. I mean, I used to say how Donald Trump is a child all the time because, I mean, that's what he does. Like, he as an example, he's the name calling all the time. He has to have a name for everybody. And he's the one who maybe just sets the example for them all. He's the one who goes out there, Sleepy Joe Biden, Crooked Hillary, Lion who? I mean, there's Lion Press, but with those lying somebody, was a Crooked Ted, because for a while it was a Crooked Ted something. Like everybody had a name. Everybody has to have a name when it came to Donald Trump. It's just utter childishness, and it's seeping throughout the Republican Party. Like, there used to be a time, even if I disagreed with the Republicans, where they would at least act with a certain amount of decorum, for the most part. This is why, even though I felt that Joe Biden was a little naive in 2020, when he felt that he would be able to come in and he would be the guy that would be able to unify everybody, because when he was a senator way back in the day, they would go and have lunch together, and they would sit down and they would have discussions at lunch and work out their problems, and everything would be hunky-dory. And even if they disagreed on issues, they would still be able to sit down and be civil. And I was like, I'm voting for you, but I think you're a little naive on this, Joe, because I think you're thinking back to the time before Barack Obama, BBO, before Barack Obama, because when Barack Obama became president, they immediately was like, we're going to have a meeting even before he's sworn in to figure out how we're going to stop him from doing anything that he wants to do. So decorum and everything went out the window at that point. There was no working together with Republicans at that point. But, I mean, he naively believed that he was going to be able to do so, but that was way out the window way before then. So, Jeff, I thought the gummy had worn off. I seem to have been mistaken. just don't get whited out. Gibson Media, I want everybody's name. Nikki Haley doubles down on social media surveillance initiative. Ooh, I didn't see that. I'll get to that in a second, Gibson. Hold on, let me look at that. Because let me just say something real quick on Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley may very well seem to be, like, back in 2016, I said, and I quote, or I'll paraphrase what I said, that Jeb Bush was on stage and he seemed to be the most presidential person up there, which meant he had no chance of winning. And I was right. Jeb Bush had no chance of winning. Nikki Haley up there on the debate stage, from what I've seen, seems to look the most presidential on the debate stage. Of course, even if Donald Trump was up there, she would be the most presidential looking person up there, and he's been president. That doesn't mean I want to get elected, because she's doubling down on a lot of things. But before I get to the whole Nikki Haley thing, let me just jot that down real quick. That I want to look. Nikki Haley social media surveillance. Black lights and disinfectant for all Republicans bill. I don't know if I want to put black lights anywhere near where Republicans are sleeping. Nikki is Jeb Bush in 3-inch heels. Pretty much. Her Reforms on Ruthless podcast, the former UN ambassador said under her initiative, all social media users would be identified by names listed on their government identification. Like, what if you don't have government identification? You don't need to see our identification. Just use the force. You don't need to see our identification. Move along. They can go about their business. Let's talk about the third thing before we get to that. I'll get to something else with Gibson in a second. I'll get to something else with Gibson in a second, but I don't want to run viewers off either. So maybe later, me and Gibson can get into something. Maybe we'll see. Because I don't want to run people off yet. Because I know a lot of people don't like you. I mean, I don't mind discussing it with you, but we can keep it short. But I'll just put it this way. If you can put it in the chat, put it in the chat. Without calling, put it in the chat. If you can't put it in chat, we'll keep it a short phone call later. How about that? Because I'm not done talking about this yet. I want your opinion on what the Republicans in Ohio are trying to do after the Ohio citizens passed the constitutional amendment to codify the right to have an abortion in the Ohio Constitution. Now that the Republicans are trying to take away the ability of the courts in Ohio to rule on whether or not things are constitutional or not. Whether or not the rules fall under the Constitution, Ohio Constitution or not. Like basically saying, we're going to say whether or not things are constitutional. We're going to say whether or not these things are within the Constitution or not y'all. Like basically stripping the Supreme Court of their authority to say whether or not a law is constitutional or not, therefore removing the teeth from the court system, therefore nullifying the power that the constitutional amendment has. Anyway, if you can put that in the chat, put it in the chat. If you can say agree or disagree with it, and let me make it simple, cool. Otherwise, we'll talk about that later. Jojo Mojo, DeSantis is the strangest dude. He would be better cast on Spaceballs. Maybe that's who... whatchamacallit reminds me of. Not the new Speaker of the House. Reminds me of Dark Helmet without the helmet. Maybe that's who he's been reminding me of this entire time. Maybe I'll have to pull up a picture. Let's do that real quick before I get to the third thing. I'm having a very slow... These pictures are loading very slowly. Where are you? Okay, so what do you think? Speaker of the House versus Dark Helmet. What do y'all think? Close enough? Is that close enough Speaker of the House Johnson and Rick Moranis as Dark Helmet. We'll see. See what everybody thinks about that. I'm rather amused. Anyway. Separated at birth. Covenant helmet. With different glasses, I could see it. I love Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks is awesome. He's going to take us to ludicrous speed. Go! Anywho, the third one that happened like on the same day, I believe, as all the other childishness that went on. Jared Moskowitz and the chair of the Oversight and Accountability Committee, James Comer, got into a heated exchange on Tuesday. And they're going over oversight of the GSA. Moskowitz referenced a loan that President Biden made to his brother, which the committee had been looking into the probe of the Biden family finances. Comer had gone on Fox News and told people that while the president was out of office, he had a loan with his brother, and in a way evading taxes or whatever, because they're trying to make a big deal out of this loan. It has come out in the public that you also do business with your brother and potential loans. And so since you have framed and manipulated that with the American people that Joe Biden did something wrong when he wasn't in office, I would like to know if you would like to use some of my time. And it's like, I would love it. Comer retorted, he retweeted the story, completely false. I've never loaned my brother one penny, blah, 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 blah. He was a dentist, had farmland, blah, blah, blah. So I bought it from my brother. That story was tweeted. It also had a shell company. That was BS. Apparently he cursed or whatever. And then he calls him a smurf. And you know what? That was pretty smurfed up of him of doing that. It's not very smurfy of him to call him a smurf in the middle of the smurfing meeting. I would say that's bull smurf. Calling him a smurf. I mean, he's not blue. I mean, it's anti-smurfetic for him to say that. I didn't see that Moskowitz said that Gargamel is very angry today. He called him Gargamel. That's great. And then Jojo Mojo Cornwood does look like Gargamel, really. Yeah, it kind of does. But I mean, that is definitely a great comeback to call Comer Gargamel when Comer called Moskowitz a smurf. The only credible thing Elon Musk did was put Spaceballs names to Model S X speed modes, like a new Model S Plaid edition. It's funny. I mean, that is kind of funny. I'll give him I'll give him credit for that. Stop clocks being right twice a day and all. There was a person at Sun's show other night, full costume of Darth Vader. So funny to see that crowd surfing. That is pretty funny. There's a guy that is typically outside like Saints games, and he's outside like concerts, and he'll just sometimes be randomly on the street in downtown New Orleans, and he'll dress up like Darth Vader but in Saints colors, and he'll just be dancing to music, and he'll just be like dancing for tips and stuff like that. It's rather amusing. So we have lots of creative people here in the city of New Orleans. A lot of the times, though, when my son gets into like some extreme crazy laughing fits, like where he just can't stop laughing and just like can't stop, I'll be like, he's gone the plaid. So, anyway, let's see. Let's see if there's any more information about Nikki Haley media surveillance other than the requirement of the social media stuff. Well, 5 hours ago, AP News. Nikki Haley walks back her demand that social media ban anonymous posters after facing GOP backlash. Of course she does. Nikki Haley on Wednesday partially walked back her proposed requirement that social media companies ban people from posting anonymously online for national security reasons, a stance for which she drew backlash across conservative social media and some of her GOP presidential rivals. The former United Nations ambassador comments Tuesday to Fox News were quickly spread by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Haley and DeSantis were trying to resonate with GOP constituencies, including parents worried for their children's online safety, as well as voters fearful of China's influence as they try and battle for a distant second place behind former President Trump. Haley and DeSantis have accused each other of being weak on China in particular. Every person on social media should be verified in their name. It's a national security threat. Haley, a former South Carolina governor and UN ambassador, said Tuesday on Fox News, when you do that, all of a sudden people have to stand by what they say, and it gets rid of Russian bots, Iranian bots, and Chinese bots. Saying that she fears the social media anonymity can translate into misinformation. Haley said you're going to get some civility when people know their name is next to what they say. Haley also said Tuesday that she would demand access to social media algorithms to understand how various content ends up in front of certain users. They need to verify every single person on their outlet, and I want it by name. You know who are anonymous writers back in the day? Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison when they wrote the Federalist Papers, DeSantis posted on X, saying Haley's proposed ban was dangerous and unconstitutional. Others in conservative media echoed DeSantis' notion. Nice try, Nikki, Charlie Kirk said, co-founder of conservative youth organization Turning Point. Anonymous speech is part of free speech. Conservative radio personality Dana Loesch agreed. I'm still 1,000,000% against government regulation and stuff like this. Vivek Ramaswamy, with whom Haley has frequently feuded, including calling him scum, referenced her idea as disgusting. Replying to Ramaswamy was Elon Musk's the owner of X, formerly of Twitter. Super messed up, Musgrove. She can stop pretending to run for president now. Under his ownership, Musk has opened up X verification to paid users. By Wednesday, Haley had somewhat amended her stance, asked on CNBC if she was advocating for a ban on all social media accounts that are anonymous. Haley said that she believed life would be more civil if we were able to do that. She was focused on foreign-based actors, not U.S. citizens. I don't mind anonymous American people having free speech. What I don't like is anonymous Russians, Chinese, and Iranians having free speech. Haley said, not explaining how she would recommend that social media companies parse those users. Anywho. So she walked it back after getting bit for doing that. Funny how Pitch Comer's voice got when defending himself. It's funny how Jeff Cruer's voice gets when he starts defending himself too. That's freaking hilarious as well. But what's up, Easy E? How's it going? Let's see. Republican presidential primaries. What's the first one? Well, that's just the... What's the one? Nikki Haley, polling by state. What's up, Cynthia? Good to see you. Okay, I had seen something about Nikki Haley and New Hampshire, but Nikki Haley is currently just in second place in New Hampshire. But let's see. Haley, the former United Nations ambassador, saw double-digit gains in support since August, according to Emerson's survey. Trump held his lead, earning 49% of support. Haley went to 18% in the November poll, so she still only has 18 to his 49, so he's still ahead by 31%. So she's not doing great. But then again, you know, it's still a good bit before. You still got a month and a half or so, maybe 2 months before that primary happens. So there's a lot of stuff could happen in trials. So we'll see. Like, hey, Liberal Dan, that's why Ramaswamy wanted Joe Rogan. The GOP equals MMA. That's right. Let me tell you something, Joe Rogan. I smoke rocks. For anybody who used to watch Dave Chappelle. Hey, what's up, Seha? Good to see you. The Republican two-step of deflect, over talk, then obfuscate, then trying to use your position as being more righteous. Exactly. I mean, look. I mean, I think Chris Christie is right on one thing, that he's probably the only one actually trying to run for president, and most of the other people out there are trying to run for second place, trying to be... I mean, maybe Nikki Haley has said some things. I think Nikki Haley might have said Donald Trump was the right person at the time back then. Maybe she said he's not the right person at the time now. But I think everybody else is pretty much up there trying to run for second place. Maybe not DeSantis. I don't know what DeSantis is doing. I don't think DeSantis would accept vice president. I don't think Donald Trump in any way would name him vice president, but I think he's just floundering, and I don't know what the hell Ron DeSantis is doing. Poor Rhonda. But Chris Christie is clearly the only one who is out there trying to actually defeat him, and he's right about a lot of the things that he's saying about why Donald Trump cannot or should not be president. Of course, it's Chris Christie has a problem when Chris Christie has to go on MSNBC and beg MSNBC viewers to donate $1 to his campaign so that he can make sure to be on the next debate stage. Because apparently you have to have a certain number of donors in order to be able to make the next debate stage. So if you just donate $1 to his campaign, he could be on the debate stage. I'm not donating $1 to his campaign. I'm not going to donate $1 to a Republican presidential candidate. I'm not donating a penny to a Republican presidential candidate. F you. No. If you can't do it yourself, why should I even bother? But, you know, it just shows how pathetic his campaign is and how pathetic the Republican Party is, because they've got so much support behind Trump that he's the nominee. I mean, like in 2016, Hillary Clinton was the de facto nominee. As soon as Hillary Clinton stopped being Secretary of the State, she became the de facto nominee. Because we all know what she was doing. We all knew why she stopped being Secretary of State. We all knew that she was going to be running for president, that she started running for president the moment she stopped being Secretary of State. And everybody else who decided to run was like, why? Why bother? Well, Bernie decided to run, and he had to build up his name recognition, and he started building up his name recognition at the start of the primaries. Again, not smart. He had a 4% name recognition at the start of the election. Now he became much more popular, much more well-known. I knew who he was, but that's because I am supposed to be well-informed on politics. I have a podcast. But you can't hope to overcome somebody with such a large lead. Now, Bernie clearly did better than any of these Republican clowns are. Maybe one of these Republican clowns could catch up if there were no more of the other clowns in the race, but since there are so many other clowns in the race, none of them could ever hope to even climb up into something competitive. but all of them are trying to play this, well, here's why I would be a good pick, but I don't want to pick on Donald because I eventually want to be his vice president. Like Vivek Ramaswamy. He clearly wants to be vice president, even though he won't say it. He clearly wants to be. So, Big Hook. Christie is playing the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I'm sorry. Christie. I used to think a long time ago that when it came to Republican governors, there was like two that were reasonable. Two Republican governors that were reasonable. Well, one of them I think was Christine Todd Whitman. Am I remembering that name right? Or was she a Democrat? She's co-chair of the Forward Party. Yeah, she was a Republican until 2022. And apparently she was also governor of New Jersey. So apparently there was two Republican governors who I used to think were reasonable. One being Christine Todd Whitman, because she actually had a reasonable view on like gay marriage. So she seemed to she was like, let's get out of the marriage business altogether for government, and let's let, marriage be a religious thing and let government be a civil union thing. Kind of like what Israel does. Israel doesn't have gay marriage, but it also doesn't have straight marriage. Israel just has civil unions as a governmental recognized thing, and marriage is left to religions. And there were other things that Christine Todd Whitman did that were reasonable, other things not, but again, okay. The other person for a while was, Chris Christie, for doing some things that I thought were reasonable. But then one thing I'll never be able to look past was they have the line item veto in New Jersey, where the governor can be like, okay, I'll sign this, but I'm going to veto these particular items on the budget where I don't agree with this. I don't agree with this. I don't agree with this. So I'm going to veto these line items because I don't like them. So one of the things that Chris Christie did, because he had Democrats in the legislature and he was the governor, he negotiated a deal with the Democrats in the legislature that everybody agreed to. And he was like, all right, we're going to have this deal. We have a deal. Fine. You sign the budget and I'll sign will you pass this budget and I'll sign the budget. And then what did he do? He line item vetoed all the things that he gave away to the Democrats. Yeah, F you, Chris Christie. There's no way I would ever support you. Sorry. No way. Let's see, I'm missing a Y in they, and your date is wrong. That is right. I am missing something and my date is wrong. Oh well. I could fix that real quick. Although for half the show, it'll be terrible. I don't know how did I miss that? I've usually been pretty good at that. Do. Let's bring this out really quick. And the first couple times they were talking about, I thought you were talking about on the show description on YouTube, and I was like, what? What are you talking about? And then all of a sudden, nope, that's not what you're talking about. I'm like, oh, I see. So let's share, download, Done. Download. And then I think it's finished. There we go. That's fixed. I mean, for the first half of the show, it'll be terrible. You know, it'll look silly, but hey, you know what Donald Trump says.
It is what it is.
Thank you, Donald. So I'm trying to get my Facebook family here, but no good. Not going so good. Wrong date doesn't help when sharing. Sorry. I mean, the description on YouTube does have it right. Anywho. So, I appreciate y'all paying attention. Thank you. That's not the first time I've done it. I'm sure it won't be the last time that I do it. I kind of base it off of a template and edit it, and sometimes I'm stupid. The black light and ivermectin woke up Christy. Anywho. So, for those of you that were here Monday, I played some clips where I called my shot, where Donald Trump had said something about how we had Obamacare for 17 years, which would have, at the time that he said it, would have like, it was like 2018, it would have put Obamacare being passed in 2001. And I said on the show, on my podcast on a Wednesday, it was because I always had it on Wednesday and not Mondays at that point. On the Wednesday, I said, I guarantee you that one of Jeff's listeners, or maybe even the host himself, would say, okay, well, it seems like 17 years. And then I called into the Jeff show the very next day, and I said the whole thing, and I was like, look, you know, can we agree that, you know, when Obama said that there are 50 and then had a long pause and then 7, he didn't mean 57 states, that he probably meant 47 states, but just had a long pause and he just misspoke and he's not stupid? And can we agree that Donald Trump probably just misspoke and didn't really think that we had Obamacare for 17 years? And then Jeff immediately goes, feels like 17 years. And I'm laughing in my car because he just gave me a great podcast bit because I called my shot and I was right. So, on Monday, I was talking about my student loans and how, or I was talking about how I called into Jeff Carrera's show and I was talking about the GOP hypocrisy on abortion in Ohio, how they're trying to pass some law to detoothify their court system to be able to not rule on Ohio's abortion laws if they violate the Ohio Constitution. And I don't know if detoothify is a word or not. I made it up. If it's not, we've now made up a word, detoothify. Deal with it. And I said, and some other caller called in and said, well, why don't you talk about Joe Biden and name something good Joe Biden did? So I called in Tuesday. I said I was going to call in at some point, and I happened to call in Tuesday. So Monday I said I was going to call in and I was going to talk about the student loans and how Joe Biden's SAVE plan saved me $250 a month in student loan payments, and that would save me probably $30,000 over the course of my payments until they get written off. But how his followers, his listeners, would probably call in and then say how horrible it is that I don't repay my loans, because you take a loan, you should have to repay your loan, despite the fact that it's part of my promissory note. That is something, a part of the contract that I pay. So, and even though the fact that they probably say nothing about Donald Trump and him and him utilizing bankruptcy to get out of his debts, and utilizing the court system to get out of his debts. So I called in Tuesday, and I got a twofer. Here's the twofer.
After 20 years worth of payments, that I make, I'll get the rest of the loans written off. And of course, some of your listeners might be very well say, well, if you pay your loan, if you have to take a loan, you should pay it. Well, that's part of my promissory note. A lot of people criticize, people for having their loans written off at the end of the 20 years, but that's part of the promissory note. That's part of the contract that I signed. And a lot of these people are the same people that would criticize Trump for utilizing bankruptcy, or that praise Trump and say he's smart for utilizing bankruptcy with his businesses to make personal wealth.
I am so happy that Liberal Dan is going to be getting help with his little loan. Number one, I've got daughters that I paid for their colleges, and I don't feel like paying for other people's.
I'm not surprised, but I'm still equally disgusted by what I hear. So Liberal Dan is admitting he's a dupe. Biden wanted to win over all of these people that had student loans and get their votes by handing them freebies. That's your typical liberal mindset. Now, I didn't remember having any of my loan payments suspended during COVID or for 3 years from my mortgage or my car payment or anything else that I borrowed. Nobody forced me to buy a home. Nobody forced Liberal Dan to go to college. I wanted to do something, so I had to find a way to pay for it. Of course, people like Liberal Dan, they don't want to have to pay for the obligations they make to get the benefits that they receive. Typical.
But, well, the first person wasn't a caller. The first person was the current guest, who calls herself Deplorable Dion. And the next person was a caller, though. And I'm just like, I literally called my shot, and both of them just did what I said that they were going to do. Both of them did exactly what I said they're going to. They said, well, you should have to pay back your loan. Why should I not be able to utilize a portion of the contract that I signed? If I sign a contract that says I get these benefits, I get these provisions, that these loans, that I can get income-based repayment, that I can get the loans written off after X amount of payments, regardless of how much I've paid into it, if that's the terms of the loan, then why should I get to utilize those terms? It's ridiculous. Meanwhile, they'll sit there and praise Trump for being a smart businessman for utilizing bankruptcy. This week's Hypocrite of the Week is all these conservatives. Like, it's so funny. Like, I was going to call in today, but I kind of overslept to be able to call in but just calling my shot it's kind of like the Obama when he came in during like when he was wearing the mask and he came into some gym and he got the ball and he took a three and he made the shot and he's like, that's what I do. Calling my shot. That's what I do. So, I mean, it's crazy how they'll sit there and bend over backwards to justify, again, like Trump or any other wealthy person, when they just consistently over and over and over again will they'll take advantage of this stuff, and it's nobody's they don't blame him. Let's see. But when I do it, when other people do it, it's horrific. It's terrible. It's awful. I'm trying to see if I can find some of these posts that I've made on my Liberal Dan page. because I've had some other examples where I've called my shot. And let's go back one. No, that's not it. Bill P, they love Liberal Dan. Oh, they do love me. They love me a lot. It used to be when I would call into the other show with the host that named me, when Rebecca Pratt named me, and I would call into that show and people would meet me, like, they would be excited. Like, those conservatives would get excited. Like, when I was working at a previous employer and they hired somebody new, and like one of the bosses was like, now that you're hired, we can talk politics. We were having a beer after work at the bar downstairs, and he was like, what's your political persuasions? He was like, I'm more of a libertarian type, and the other libertarians like, yes. And the guy, the boss is like, well, I've been conservative, but I'm getting more progressive as I grow older. And I kind of thought to myself, yeah, right, you're not getting more progressive. Shut up. But I didn't say anything. And he goes, and this guy over here is Liberal Dan. And the guy was like, you're Liberal Dan from the radio? And I was like, that's me. He was like, oh my God, I'm going to go home and call my wife and tell her that I work with Liberal Dan. She's going to be excited. And I was like, this is weird. That's one of the reasons why I started the podcast in the first place, because I would meet people out and about and be like, they would be like, oh my God, you're Liberal Dan. And I'd be like, I'm not a celebrity, but okay. I'm glad you're excited to meet me. Yeah, Steve, not paying taxes makes me smart. Not paying student loans, oh dear, you're evil. Exactly, yes. I don't have to pay taxes. I use the system to my advantage. I'm a smart person. But when I use the system to my advantage and I take advantage of the rules as they are written, I'm somehow a leech and a moocher, and I'm lazy and whatever. Like it's hypocrisy is a conservative prerequisite. Trying to search on the page and see if I can find these. I know I posted them on here, but I think a lot of them have gotten lost way back in the day when I started using the page more. And it's also being a little laggy. My page is I don't know, Facebook is being a little laggy. Facebook has been a pain in the ass with me too recently, because like on several days, like I tried to bring up my memories and it wouldn't show me my memories. And I'm like, what's wrong with you? Well, my memories. I want to see my cute kids. So the same dude claiming he had to grasp his necklace at Dan's comments is also the same dude you see on one of those car repo shows chasing the tow truck. That's great. To scroll back, see if I've missed anything. You are famous. Well, somewhat famous. Hopefully one day I'll be more enough, at least enough to become monetized. Then we'll see. All right, let's do some scrolly. Because usually when I call my shot, when it used to be that I called my shot, it would be calling my shot about voter ID laws. Because when my favorite thing to do is to call my shot about so-called voter ID laws. Let's see, can I pull this up? Is this in the post? Here we go. Here's one. Let's open up the alternate. So this is a coup to steal an election, and you know it just as well as you knew for years Obama was the center, blah, 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 blah. I was like, this coup was started in GOP by 2010 with the Red Map Project. Then came the so-called voter ID laws, which contain non-ID provisions that make it harder for certain groups to vote. And I guarantee you someone is going to ask what is wrong with requiring an ID to vote when I am talking about those non-ID provisions in those laws. Then, Exactly how is voting being made harder? After every election, I walk by the graveyard and every Democrat I had voted to stick up a grave marker. Having a ID, spelled wrong, is not a problem since it's needed for everything else. And if you have no ID, then you can't get Medicare, food stamps, prescriptions, blah, 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 blah. Did you read? You said having an ID is not a problem since it's needed for everything else. I said, then came the so-called voter ID laws, which contain non-ID provisions. I called my shot, and you still did what I predicted someone would do. So, again, calling my shot. I'm not throwing away my shot. Just like my country, I'm young. I'm not throwing away my shot. Let's see. What's this one? No, that's not it. That's just a tweet. Where are you? There should be another one that's pretty close to that one. I made a couple of posts that were just a kind of a lump together. It was like, here's another example of me showing people how I call my shot. I can't find it in like another few seconds, so I'm gonna give up. Here we go. There's another one. You're full of crap. Why don't Democrats want voters to use ID for voting? Stop making poor excuses. It's not the ID requirements that are the problem. The so-called voter ID laws contain other non-ID requirements inserted to specifically prevent people from legally voting, but they call them voter ID laws. So when people oppose non-ID parts, you can ask what's wrong with voter ID. And then... So explain to me what's wrong with proof of an ID is a bad thing. You show ID to buy beer, blah, 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 blah. LMFAO, you just did what I said you would do. I literally said it's not the ID, it's the other non-ID provisions. Then despite what that people still ask that, what's wrong with an ID? I told you what you were going to do and you did it. So, yeah. It's fun. It's fun to do all the time. I highly recommend it. Johnny, what's a Facebook? Daniel, really, Johnny? Any other Cobra? I am a Cobra Kai fan, though I am behind on last season. I need to catch up. There's two things I watch with my wife that we're behind on. We're behind on Miss Maisel, and we're behind on Cobra Kai. We need to catch back up on both of them. But yes, I love Cobra Kai. Cobra Kai is amazing. Actually, my youngest son is ahead of me on Cobra Kai because he likes it too. So, what's up, Bicycle Mike? Good to see you. See, Big Hook. It's easy to demonize people trying to better themselves, especially when the conservatives know they aren't able to handle post-secondary education. Well, Donald Trump said he loves the poorly educated. And, well, every day the poorly educated go ahead and prove why they love the poorly educated, or why he loves the poorly educated. So... see, Big Hook. Poll challengers at voting centers should be illegal. Absolutely. Used to be like, yeah, poll watchers used to be the idea of poll. So the idea of poll watchers should be just people in there just kind of like taking like notes to see who's voting, so that you can then report it to your campaigns and then say, okay, these are the people that still need to come out and vote, so you can call them and have them come out. Because you can register to be a poll watcher, but a lot of times people use poll watchers to be intimidating, and that's a problem. So, Bicycle Mike, free IDs are required. Are they required everywhere? I don't know if they're required everywhere. Louisiana has them, which is one of the reasons I don't have a problem with Louisiana's requirements to show a voter ID. And actually, in Louisiana, you don't actually have to show a voter ID. You can come to the polls with everything that you would need to get a voter ID and still vote. It might be a provisional ballot, but you can, whatever you would need to bring to the DMV to say, hey, I want a voter ID, I think you could bring that to the polls and be like, hey, I want to vote, and be like, okay. So 6 of one, half dozen of the other, I suppose. But there's still a requirement at the polls to prove that you are who you say you are. And we can go to I've done a video on this, and one of my 4 videos in the GOP coup series that I have, one of them actually cites a Heritage Foundation site. And why do I cite the Heritage Foundation? Because it makes it less likely for a conservative to then be able to say, well, you're just using liberal sources. No, I'm using the Heritage Foundation. The conservatives then literally can't come to me and say I'm using a liberal source. I use a Heritage Foundation source and say, this is what the Heritage Foundation is saying. They're saying of all these examples of fraud that has taken place in elections, like a minuscule amount would have been fixed by an ID requirement. Most election fraud that takes place would never be fixed with a voter ID. Never. Because the risk of an individual trying to cast a ballot illegally, or using a fake ID or whatever, or trying to cast a vote that's not yours, the punishment for that is overwhelmingly harsh based on the benefit that you get for it. I'm not saying the punishment is too harsh. Punishment's fine, but I'm saying is that the reward that you get, the chances that you will overturn an election by you taking this action, is so small that it's not worth the risk if you get caught and then get that punishment. So no one's really doing it. But again, this is the reason why they make it into such a big deal, because they want to make the low educated, the poorly educated voters, they want to make them believe that it is a big problem so they can pass these laws and then shove these laws full of other things that are not related to showing an ID and get those passed through in order to make it harder for people to vote. That's what these laws are there for. They're vehicles to get other things through, which is one of the reasons in one of my videos on voter IDs, I say, let's just pass a clean voter ID law bill where it's just the ID and nothing else. Let's just say, let's give a nationwide voter ID where everybody gets one for free, and it's uniform and it can be used by everybody on all elections. You can show it. Here's my ID. I am who I say I am. Boom, there you go. This is me. I get it for free. No one else can use it. It's mine. The punishment for using somebody else's will be high. Everybody has to use one to vote. And then you no longer give the Republicans a vehicle to pass all of these other election manipulation schemes, so that when they try and pass them, they have to find a different way to do it at least. They can't do it under the guise of this BS idea that voter IDs are somehow going to make the system any more safe, because it doesn't. The Republicans always make it harder to vote when incidents of cheating would have zero effect on election results. Exactly. Cynthia from Texas again. Yes, free nationwide ID, voter solved. They don't get that it's a tax. And Mexico does it. Mexico gives everyone a free ID. Jolie, I'm behind on Ms. Mays on Cobra Kai 2. I've actually started watching... It's the new show on Paramount. What's it called? Bass something. It's basically the show about the the person who is the original the guy who was the Lone Ranger, like the original like person who was what's the word I'm looking for? The muse, the original person that the Lone Ranger was based off of, except the original person that the Lone Ranger was based off of was black. It was a black person. And the reason I knew that already ahead of time, Bass Reeves, I think is the name. The reason I knew that ahead of time was because they covered that in the show Timeless. It was a time travel show. So I started watching the first episode, and it was a little bit of a gut-wrenching episode, but it looks like it looks promising, looks good. I know something's bad's gonna happen in the next episode because, you know, this guy's been crapped on already, twice already, so... let's see. What did I miss with Seha said? It's voter ID dumb. We have state driver's ID, real ID, birth certificate, passports. Pick a freaking ID. Well, the problem is that sometimes they have state issued IDs, and some of these states will say, okay, we don't want these IDs being used. So they had examples where older people had a specific ID and they used these IDs forever and they didn't think they needed any other IDs. And then the state was like, we don't want them using these IDs. So then they had to go find a new one. But these people who were old had no other IDs. They didn't have the paperwork to go get the new ones. So you're now stopping elderly people from voting. Let's see. Ask the villages in Florida about voter fraud. Are the villages in Florida worried about voter fraud? I thought the villages in Florida were worried about something else, completely different. Jeff Curry, got into a strip club with a fake ID. The dude at the door told me to get a better one and let me in anyways. That's funny. I got into a casino without an ID when I was 18. You could drink when you were 18, but you couldn't. You technically couldn't buy it, but they couldn't get in trouble for selling it to you when I got down here at 18. But I went to the casino and we walked in and the person was like, do you have an ID? And I was like, I left it at the hotel. And the guy was like, all right, come on in. I'm like, okay. So I went in and I go sit down at the blackjack table. I might have told the story already, but I'm playing some blackjack. And the person at the pit boss is like, hey, do you have a Players Club card? And I was like, no, I don't. She was like, would you like one? I'm like, sure, why not? They're like, I just need to see your ID. I'm like, I left it back in the hotel. She's like, okay, I just need some information from you. What's your name? I gave my name. What's your date of birth? I gave my date of birth, except I added 4 years to my date of birth automatically without hesitation. And she gave me the Players Club card. So then I was able to, so then when I came back to the same casino, like a month or two later or whatever, and they were like, can I see your ID? And I was like, I don't have my ID, but I have my Players Club card. Is that all right? And they're like, sure, come on in. Because why would I have a Players Club card how could I have a Players Club card if I wasn't legal? Right? So I used my Players Club card to get into the casino from that point on. It was hilarious. The villages were lined up to vote for Trump and get their penicillin. Bill, you know what I was talking about. See, in Huntington, West Virginia, you have 10 days to transfer your driver's license, but you need 2 proofs of address that have to be specified utility bills. How the heck did they think my poor self had it? Exactly. Trump let teenagers use it. I'm sure Trump let teenagers do a lot of other things too. Or he might not have let teenagers do a lot of things. Trump probably forced himself on teenagers with other things. Because, Mr. Grab him by the hoo-ha. Allegedly. Well, I think it's not allegedly said that he grabbed him by the hoo-ha, but, If he says that he did it, I'm sure he did it. And he also bragged about going into the Miss Teen USA locker room while they were changing to go look at all the naked teen girls. And, he was good old buddy with Jeffrey Epstein, who didn't kill himself. West Virginia is so beautiful, but the maggots are thick as weeds and as nuts as his troll roll that tags along every Klan rally. Evie Winters, somebody who had on the show twice, and we've talked about trans issues, is somebody who's from West Virginia initially, and she'll talk about some interesting things about West Virginia as well. Like there's they'll be really conservative, but they won't, a lot of them, from the real backwoods, they don't like cops though. They'll hate the cops in some areas. They won't be Blue Lives Matter type Republicans. They hate the cops. They still might not like black people, but they still hate the cops. Jolie, I had a fake ID. First bar I ever went to was with my gay best friend. Went to a male strip club emceed by drag queens. I was 15. Wow. That's crazy. Yeah, because I didn't need a fake ID to get into any place when I was in New Orleans, because you could be 18 and get into places. Here's what they used to do in New Orleans that was so freaking dumb. So you would go into a place in New Orleans, in some places, right? And what they would do is, if you were under 21 but over 18, they would stamp your hand. You could not drink if you were over 18. So they would stamp your hand with a stamp. So if your hand had a stamp on it, you couldn't drink. Oh, look, my hand doesn't have a stamp on it anymore. Now I can drink. How dumb are you? I mean, well, not dumb. I mean, it's pretty much every it was like wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more. Because again, the bar could not, the way that the laws were written, the bar could not get in trouble for selling it to you. You would only get in trouble for buying it, but you couldn't get in trouble for possessing it or drinking it because of the way the law was written. So the only time that they could actually bust you was for actually making the purchase. It was so weird. And the only time, and that changed right 20 days before I turned 21. So what do you think about Fani Willis saying that the trial probably won't happen before the election? I think I missed that. I'm surprised. that was said. Let me see. Because I thought they were trying to get it done so it would happen before the primaries, at least. Georgia trial may not wrap till 2025. Oh, crap. Let's see. That's just a video. I don't want to watch the video. See, Axios. Fani Willis predicts Georgia election case could go into early 2025. That trial proceedings with Strawling racketeering case could play out at the same time next year's presidential election. Trial date has not yet been set. I believe that case, there will be a trial. I believe the trial may take many months. I don't expect that we will conclude until the winter or very early part of 2025. Trump, who's been indicted four times in 4 different jurisdictions, has repeatedly tried to delay whatever tactic has been his best strategy. Willis dismissed the 2024 presidential election as a consideration. I don't, when making decisions about cases to bring, consider any election cycle or election season. The GOP presidential frontrunner is already facing the prospect of at least 2 criminal trials slated to start in March when Super Tuesday takes place. Now, here's the only thing that I'm thinking, that it maybe she's thinking that, as a state case, that maybe the federal cases might take precedence. If that's what she's thinking, that that the reason that her trial might take longer is that the federal trials might take precedence, and maybe that's fine. I don't know. But to me, there's nothing that Trump could do about the state trial. Like, Trump can't do he can't pardon himself. Now, there are people that say that Trump can't pardon himself federally either. That's debatable. Again, I think that's up to the Supreme Court, and I think the Supreme Court would rule in Trump's favor. 5-4 at least. So, where is it?
It is what it is.
Thank you, Donald. So, yeah, I don't think that. I don't think so. I think that it's better to have the state trial finished up before the election, but if the problem then becomes if Donald Trump, if the election does not conclude until after the presidential election, and if this nation is dumb enough to reelect Donald Trump, which, knock on wood, hopefully they're not, then you have a problem, because you can't remove a sitting president from office except for impeachment. So federal law would supersede state law in that issue. He can't pardon himself, but he couldn't be removed from the presidency. So him serving as president would delay any time served in jail or in prison until after he stopped being president. That's at least my layperson legal theory on the matter. So, of course, then there's the other scenario, which I've brought up before in the podcast, which is what happens if Donald Trump gets convicted and sent to prison in the Georgia case before the trial finishes, before the elections. If the trial finishes before the election, Donald Trump gets sent to prison, and then he gets elected president. Then you have a constitutional crisis, because does then he have to be released from prison in order to be able to serve as president? That probably goes before the Supreme Court immediately to be determined. And I'm sure they would also then rule at least 5-4 that he would have to be able to be let out of prison to serve his sentence, and then whatever. Bicycle Mike, he won't be president. We all thought he wouldn't be president in 2017, neither. Right? Did all of us thought that Hillary Clinton would have no problem beating Donald Trump? There are a lot of stupid people in this country. There are a lot of stupid people in this country. And I don't have faith that any of them will vote right. See, Donald Trump will soon be bankrupt. New York going to strip Donald of his money. Then the greedy and powerful ones drawn him all fall away. They're going to look different at him. I love this for Donald. Well, that's true. I mean, you have a good point, Diz. Thank you for joining us. Good to see you. That could very well be, if the New York trial, that's one of the things that's a wild card. If the New York trial finishes up and that finally gets finished and they strip him and they fine him of his money and he has to give up like $250 million worth of assets, meaning, and then they have to basically seize all of his hard assets and liquidate, and then he has to basically, then he loses a lot of his power, because a lot of his power comes from his assumed wealth, and the way that that DA has basically worded it, she's worded it brilliantly, that how he pretends to be wealthy, basically, because basically she's been saying that he's been lying about his wealth this entire time, that he's not as wealthy as he makes himself out to be, which is a lot of people have said that too. So yeah, if he loses a bunch of his wealth and then and you see his financial empire crumbling, then a lot of the rats are going to jump ship. And if a lot of the rats jump ship, it's possible a lot of the people might start calling in their debts and everything could start crumbling, and then who knows what happens at that point. You could see the most epic collapse ever of any human in the history of humanhoods. And that's being very nice to Donald Trump by considering that he is a human. And yes, that would give podcast material for years, probably. It would be lovely to have a podcast to be able to do that and talk about that. Just for a long time, just watching the Trump empire crumble on top of itself. P-Dubs, do you remember the song Why Don't We Get Drunk and Screw? That's Jimmy Buffett. I don't know if I think I've told that story on the podcast, I believe, where I did it on a Disney cruise. I sung that on a Disney cruise in the adults only karaoke show, because I waited for the adults only karaoke show to sing an adults only song, an adult themed song, and then the karaoke jockey was like, the KJ was like, "You mean screwdriver, drinking a screwdriver, right?" And I'm like, well, if you didn't want me singing this song, then don't put it on the list, or tell me to sing something else. So let's say Donald will always have his manga trash that's a small rabbit base and it ain't enough to win dog catcher. I mean, it's 30% of the party. I think Donald Trump has enough of the party where enough of the party is scared to go against him, because they know, the Republican Party knows that without the chunk of the people that support Donald Trump, they can't win. But how do they win with somebody whose entire financial empire crumbles? Because everyone who is a maggot is going to be like, this is all a ruse, this is all fake news, this is all meant to bruise Donald Trump. They're all out to abuse Donald Trump. They're going to blame the Jews for Donald Trump. We just want to be able to choose Donald Trump. We don't want to lose Donald Trump. We don't want Ted Cruz. We want Donald Trump. Any more rhymes I could come up with? No. I just was going on there with a head. Bicycle Mike, I bet you a whole $1 he doesn't get to be president again. I mean, I don't want to bet that he will be, but one of the things I remember saying in I think it was like April or May of 2016 was, because remember how many how many just deaths there were in 2016? Not like of everybody, but like all of the people that were like famous and people that we really liked. Like a lot of people were dying. It was like just a bad year for deaths. And I was like, maybe 2016 just sucks for deaths because the world is trying to prepare us for President Trump. And everyone's like, don't say that. And I was like, I mean, people are taking him for granted, so I don't know. And people took him for granted, and then he won. All right, Bill, thank you for... Bill, you will not see me next Monday. I will not be on next week. Thanksgiving week, I'll be off. Taking off next week. I'll go into more of that later. It's me again, Margaret. Margaret, are you naked? What, Jeff? Donald's Dick Riders will turn to Elon. Ugh. That's even that's also bad. So is it true about the 55,000 troops or whatever small email for a second-term security officer or something? I'm not sure about. I haven't seen. Let's see. Trump 55 troops. I don't know. See you next Tuesday. Yes, I did talk about the Vermin comments on Monday as well. His Vermin comments scare me. His comments about how they're tainting the blood or poisoning our blood, that scares me. I mean, that's full-on Nazi rhetoric. But again, I'll say that Trump's poisoning the. If I put on my own Facebook wall that Trump's poisoning or the people are poisoning our blood comment is pure on Nazi rhetoric. There are people on my Facebook page who will be like, "That's ridiculous, Dan. You don't know anything about that." It's like it's a clear dog whistle. Like the vermin and the poisoning our blood are clear dog whistles to the Nazis to say to them, "I'm on your side. I'm gonna be your guy. I'm the white supremacist guy. We want to make sure that our blood is pure." Do. All right, we got a caller. We'll just go right to the caller. How's it going, caller?
All right, you know who this is. Your favorite guy.
What's up,
Joe
man?
Gibson.
How's up,
How
Joe?
are you?
What's going on?
Well, first of all, I wanted to say, I know you're going to be surprised at this. I agree with you. You should not have had to pay back your student loans because we know the Federal Reserve is in charge of this country's monetary policy. They practice fractional reserve banking. They create money out of thin air. And there's really no debt anyway. The debt is not there. It's non-existent. So it's just a charge-off for the banks or whatever financial company or wherever you got the loan from. So it's just all fine. If you didn't pay it off, you're not hurting me. Tax dollars are not affected. Taxes don't pay for the services that we think. You got a good documentary to watch to learn about that, The Money Masters. It's a 3.5 hour long, which explains the Federal Reserve and the monetary policy in this country. So I say hats off to you if you didn't pay back or you're not paying back your student loans.
Well, I mean, I technically have to pay back a little, but like my payments, the required payments I have to take were lessened by like $250 a month. And actually my work pays about $50 a month as a benefit, which turns my payment to zero. But then after so many months worth of payments, the loans get written off. But it's part of my main beef with it is, I mean, we're coming at it from two different ways, but my main argument with it is if I sign a contract, I should get to use every part of my contract. Like, there should be no reason why I shouldn't get to use a term of my contract if it's in my contract. So if it's part of the contract, correct, that after I make 300 whatever number of payments are required, 360 I think, if I make 360 payments towards my student loans or whatever, if I make that number of payments and then however much is paid off, the rest gets written off, then that should be what happens. And it's silly to say that I shouldn't get to use a part of my contract. Like, I don't understand.
Well, that's right. And yeah. And you're just being attacked because you're a liberal and I get that. I understand that. And that's for once where I'll stick up for both sides on that. And then it's ignorant for anyone to make those types of comments to anyone for that matter. Right. So like I said, even the mortgage system in this country, it's a lie. The bank actually commits a felony because they're actually lending you back your own money because you create the money through your signature. So it's all, and that's why we're all screwed up with the inflation, deflation, and we blame the Republican Democrat machine and out there that, I mean, really they have no control over monetary policy. Really, it's the Federal Reserve, which is a private, independent bank, private cartel that's owned by foreign offshore bank stockholders. They're not even American stockholders that own the Federal Reserve. So it has no part of the government anyway. It's no more federal than Federal Express. So and people don't understand the monetary policies in this country, and we're getting to arguments with each other over it. And really, it has nothing to do with it, really. Of course, everyone likes lower taxes, of course, or taxes, we tax the rich. Everyone wants to tax the rich, fine. But really, it has nothing to do with it. But your comment about the Ohio thing, to change gears here, I'm a little ignorant on that. I did some reading on it, and if the people, from my understanding is that they put it to a vote, and 56% of the people voted in favor of it. So therefore, if that's what they want, if that's what the people want, then I would say have at it. If they're going to put it on the ballot, like I don't have a problem with the abortion issue. If the people want abortion, I say send it to the states. If the states decide they want it, then fine. I disagree with it. I think it's wrong. I disagree with abortion. But if the states, if it's done so constitutionally, then so be it. And then that's the way we got to live with. We got to live with it.
But what they're trying to do is they're basically saying, because we don't like how the people voted, we are now going to. Well, they tried to stop it two different ways. Like the first thing they tried to do is, like, earlier in the year, they tried to make it 60% to pass instead of 50%, and that failed because the voters were like, well, we want to vote for this, so we're going to make sure that it stays at 50. So they stopped the requirement to make it harder to pass, and then the voters passed it. And now the legislators are like, okay, well, we're just going to make it so that the courts can't enforce it. So, and like, it's like they're trying to go against yeah, that's wrong. So good. We agree on something else. So
yeah, I don't have a problem with that at all. Like I said, like I said, I don't have a problem with that at all. I disagree with abortion, but then again, that's up to the people. Like I said, it's up to my perspective then to try to convince others not to commit abortion or have abortion, or there's other ways we'll try to stop abortion. Preventative abstinence. There's so many issues with it, but I disagree with it. But like I said, if that's what the people want in a certain state, then so be it, because that's what states, I believe, are sovereign. I know we disagree on that. States have no power, you say, I think, right?
No,
states have no power.
States have power. States have powers.
Okay.
States have powers as granted to them by the 10th Amendment, or that are not granted to the federal government via the 10th Amendment or whatever. States have powers. But I'm just saying that states don't have the authority to overturn rights, and whether or not abortion is a right, we can debate. But, and I, when
you're right. States don't have a right. Yeah, you're right. They don't have nobody can overturn a right in the Constitution. Those rights are guaranteed by our Creator, by the Constitution and Bill of Rights. Nobody can take away those rights.
Right.
I agree with you.
But there's also rights that are not enumerated via the 9th Amendment that the Constitution acknowledges that are non-enumerated rights, because to suggest that we should have an exhaustive list would be silly, because how could we have an exhaustive list? To me, my thoughts on the whole thing, and this should be a conservative point of view, like this should be conservative, is that if government wants to restrict an activity, government should be the one to have to prove that it has the authority to restrict that activity.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about this idea? How about a constitutional amendment to address when life begins? Let's address it. When can we all agree life begins in the womb of a mother? And if we agree on, say, 10 weeks, then that's it. That's the cutoff point. What do you think about that? Because obviously life begins somewhere. And whether it's a heartbeat, whether it's this, that, I don't know. Let's have that debate.
My problem with that is that, you get into the point where, like, 99.5% of all abortions take place before 20 weeks. Everybody is worried about, like, those abortions taking place in, like, the third trimester. Like, that's usually made into a big deal. But in reality, the only abortions that take place in that last trimester are ones in, like, the heart-wrenching situations, like the ones where
the mother's life is in jeopardy,
where the life is in jeopardy, or the fetus is, like, going to die, or the fetus is already gone, but maybe there's a heartbeat, but there's no brain activity, or there's no skull or something, and, like, there's no chance of survival outside. So why force the person to gestate for the rest of the pregnancy when you know that the fetus is not going to survive outside of the womb?
Yeah, I can agree on that. Sure. Get
So-
government out of that
and-
decision. That's the decision between the doctor and the mother and the father, I guess. The family.
Right.
If there's a family there,
and the way
get
that
government out of it.
and the way that like the Texas law is written and the way that the Louisiana law is written in such a way is that it forces the patient to wait until the situation becomes an emergency before the doctor can take action, instead of saying and instead the doctor has instead of allowing the doctor to say this situation is going to become life-threatening, absolutely, we have to perform the procedure now or else it will become life-threatening, and it doesn't let them act beforehand. So that's the issue I have with like such a constitutional amendment that would try and say this is that would try and do anything on the issue of abortion, which is that I don't think you could effectively legislate bans in such a way that are going to be able to deal with those situations. And
you don't think we can? So legislating morality, we can't do. We can't legislate morality, basically, right?
Right. I don't think we can legislate. Well, I don't. It's not even a matter of legislating morality. I think it's the fact of you can't legislate effectively those needed exceptions. That even if you want to agree, even if you want to say that abortion should be banned at some point, but there should be exceptions, I don't think you could legislate those exceptions. And as such, and we'll agree on one thing. Like, the ideal number of abortions would be 0, because ideally every pregnancy would be planned and no pregnancies would be life-threatening. And
there you go.
And if we could make sure that we had better contraceptive measures, if we made sure that we had let's get a birth control pill for men. If there was a birth control pill for men that could prevent men from emitting semen, sperm.
I gotta look into that. Actually, I wonder if science has looked into that. I wonder. I never heard about that. Actually, I never looked into that.
There is some procedure that I think is done in India that is completely reversible. That just does a little injection that actually stops the infusion.
I don't like that, man.
A lot of people might jinx it, but apparently it's pretty effective. And it's not a cut. It's just something that stops it or whatever. Anyway, I don't know the full details of it, but the point is that let people have autonomy over their own bodies, and let's improve the technology to be able to prevent people from getting pregnant or causing other people to get pregnant in the first place. Let's encourage people to be educated on how to best prevent pregnancy and best prevent like sexually transmitted diseases as well. And let's improve medical technology to make sure that more pregnancies can be more safely done, and then you'll see the number of abortions drop to closer and closer to the ideal of 0. Because as I brought up on the show before, in Colorado, when John Hickenlooper was governor, you had a situation where even though the Affordable Care Act does make sure that oral contraception and IUD are available at 100% cost first dollar, not everybody has insurance, even with the Affordable Care Act, because there were some things in there that were missed because people fought it. And especially when they overturned the Medicaid expansion in the Supreme Court, there was a chunk. So there were people who went without. So Colorado basically said, we're going to make sure that everybody gets free access to birth control pills and IUD. And when they did that, unwanted pregnancies dropped. When unwanted pregnancies drop, that means abortions are going to drop. So if you the more you do that, the more the less abortions you're going to see. And to me, should be what people who are in the pro-life movement would want to see. But unfortunately, a lot of people just, that's not really what they seem to want to see. But yeah,
I can agree. I have a question though.
Wait, hold on.
You,
Donald Trump needs to say his part. Hold on.
Okay.
Wait.
It is what it is.
Thank you, Donald. I was having the button wasn't pushing.
Oh boy. Anyway, I got a question for you. All right. Now, why is it with the Palestinian and the Israel thing? Why is it that so many liberals are taking the side of Hamas and the Palestinians? That's what I've seen throughout the country. That's the vibe I get. Why is that? You would think it'd be the other way around, especially with the discrimination and the hate crimes against Jews throughout all the many years with Nazi Germany, the issue there, World War II, World War One. So why is it that they're taking the side, I see anyway, in my opinion, from what I see, taking the side of Hamas and the Palestinians?
Okay, well, let's separate the two. I believe that there should be a free Palestinian state and a Israel. Actually, I believe in a two-state solution. I do not lump all Palestinians in with Hamas. I make sure to make that distinction that Palestinian people are victimized by Hamas as well, because Hamas are terrorists and horrible people. Clearly, I'm not on the side of Hamas. Clearly.
Okay.
And I'll differentiate this as well, because whilst there are people who, you know, a lot of times I'll say, like, the people who we often argue with, the conservative types who we argue with on my side of the aisle are so far to the right that they don't see the difference between, you know, liberal and leftist and progressives and whatever. They don't necessarily see the difference between the two. A lot of the times the people that you're seeing that are calling Hamas freedom fighters, or that are saying that Hamas is justified, that are being ridiculous on the whole thing, are the very extreme leftists. They and probably the reason that you're seeing a lot of it, and that is because they're loud. That's the unfortunate thing about sometimes with politics, where we get a skewed view of sides, of what sides say, is because the loudest side gets the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? So the people that are the people that are the loudest are going to get the most attention. So when and the people that are the most controversial are going to probably get the most news coverage, because it's not controversial for, if I was in the middle of the street saying, I believe that the Palestinians should have a state of their own, and that the hostages should be returned, and that Israel has a right to defend itself against Hamas, but maybe Israel's not doing it in the exactly right way that they should. That's not controversial. That's me taking a nuanced approach that's reasonable, and to me, at least, I think it's reasonable. A lot of other people think it's reasonable as well. But the only people that's controversial to are those extreme leftists, and to maybe, you know, the people who are maybe extremely on the right, on the extreme right wing, or who support like Netanyahu and Likud, who want to just flatten Gaza, and who don't see a difference between Palestinians and Hamas. So.
Okay, well, that was a good answer then. Okay, because I've asked a couple people and they just couldn't answer it. They immediately went into the religious phase of it, and then the fake history side, where, you know, Palestine was always there, and we know the land was first given to the Jews through Abraham. You know, come on. You know, and you know, biblically and historically, and yes, Palestine was there, and then now the Jews have the land again, and then now we're trying to have a two-state solution, which obviously is not working, and I don't think it ever will. But that's another subject, I guess. But
right. And
I appreciate you taking a call tonight.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, I try not to take the religious approach, because I don't think we should be making political arguments based on religious things. But technically, you know, there are many people who there's a lot of arguments to be made about indigeneity, about who are the people that are indigenous to the land, and indigeneity can be based on a lot of things, including culture, and then culture can include religious aspects to it. And one of the things that's very important about indigeneity is that you are part of a minority group who is in another part, who have, when you kicked out of an area, and maintained your culture. And that's what Jews have done throughout a very long time. And you don't necessarily have to draw a direct line. Like I told somebody that I was having an argument with on another website, on TikTok, I think it was, they were trying to argue with me about the whole thing. And I was like, look, because they were trying to argue about the indigeneity about Jewish people and how they were not indigenous. I was like, look, you don't understand indigeneity. If you had two people who were in America who were both of Palestinian descent, and those two Palestinian people adopted a kid, and it was their child, that child would have a right to return to the area, because that child could claim that they were indigenous because they had a familiar background, because now they're adopted, and so it's their family that they're a part of. So you don't have to have a blood relation to claim indigeneity. And that person immediately shut up because he couldn't argue with me anymore, because I made the point. So anyway, thank you for the call.
Yeah.
We seem to agree on a bunch of stuff today. You have a good night.
Yeah, that's a first.
Yeah.
All right, take care.
Bye. There you go, Gibson Media, everybody. And we had a good... See, look. All y'all who hate when I take Gibson Media's calls, that was a great Gibson Media call, I have to say. I challenge anybody to disagree with me that being a great Gibson Media call. We agreed on a bunch of things. It showed that we agreed on a bunch of things. And he asked me a question, and I was able to answer a question in a way that nobody else was willing to do so. Why? Because I take the time to be reasonable about things. And, like... And if... That's the other thing. Like, if a conservative has a legitimate question to ask somebody on the left a question, and the people on the left won't take the time to answer the question, then the conservatives are going to continue to be ignorant, and not using ignorant in a negative pejorative way, but just ignorant like in the just don't know. Like, it's not always a negative thing to be ignorant. Sometimes you just don't know. And it's fine, but it's fine to be ignorant of something if you're trying to then learn about it. And he clearly, in good faith, asked me a question, and I answered the question, and he appreciated the answer. Now he knows a little bit more about why people are believing that the way that they did. Diz, maybe you're changing minds. Exactly. That was my point the other day when people were having a problem with Gibson Media, is that in my discussions, in my debates that I have with conservatives, there have been several times where I've changed people's minds. And that's one of the reasons why I have discussions and I have debates, and I want to bring on other people from the other side of the aisle and have these discussions on my show. It's not just because I like to argue, because I enjoy a good debate too. I enjoy a good debate, not just because I like to show that I'm right, because it's always fun to be able to prove that I'm right. You know, that's happened before. That happened the other day on TikTok, where some person claimed that I was wrong, and I was like, here's my receipts. And this is to another leftist. This is like to an extreme leftist who said I was wrong. And I was like, nope, here are my receipts. It was about whether or not Hillary would have won had the Bernie voters who voted for Bernie and then flipped to Trump had just voted for Jill Stein, or not voted at all. They didn't even have to vote for Hillary. They could have just stayed home or voted for Jill Stein, but they voted for Trump, and that's why Trump won. I loved proving that I was right in that case, and that's fun. It's fun to prove that you're right. But it's also can be educational and informational to have an honest debate with somebody, just to understand where the other side is coming from. Because when you understand where the other side is coming from, you can have a better understanding of what you're dealing with. So... Big hook. Netanyahu is a bad actor and was using Hamas as an excuse to stay in power and to make this two-state solution unworkable. I've said that before. There's a video that I have on that, where, you know, I've said in several videos that Hamas and Netanyahu have a toxic symbiotic relationship, where Netanyahu uses Hamas as a justification to justify his bad actions, so that he can obfuscate and hide his other bad actions and make sure that, you know, he can justify his staying in power. Meanwhile, Hamas likes having Netanyahu in power so they can justify their recruitment tactics and justify their actions and justify them being in power. Let's see. Let's scroll back. Silly Walker. All the Old Testament is a book about one mass murder after another, and Solomon having dozen wives, and how to perform abortion. Because that's what you do in order to determine whether or not your wife cheated on you. Is you give her, you perform an abortion, and if you give her some drink, and if she has an abortion, if her baby drops out of her, then she cheated. Let's see. Big Hook. It's called a reversal vasectomy. Yeah, I mean, it's some shot or whatever. I don't remember. Let's see. Israel has no stable neighbor. Lebanon has no government. Syria is run by a dictator. No neighbor has a stable economy. It is true. Hamas is using emotional manipulation while using civilians as shield for protection. Exactly. And the problem is, like, the extremist leftists. I mean, I label myself a pragmatic progressive. I label myself a leftist. I agree with a lot of positions on the left. I just have a problem. I'm more pragmatic, and I have a problem with the people who are like, there's no proof that Hamas uses human shields. Yeah, there is. Shut up. Jeff Curry. Anybody like hot wings? I love me some hot wings, as long as they're good. There was a place in New Orleans that had great hot wings. It was a food truck, and the food truck like broke down, and they stopped making them, and I'm so mad. And one time I was like, is there any way that I could like pay you to like cater a party or something? And they're like, no, we're not doing that. I'm like, why? I want to give you money for you to make me hot wings. Diz. Hamas are the MAGA trash of Palestine. Bibi is the MAGA trash of Israel. US has its own MAGA trash troubles. They're all the same a-holes. Have you watched one of my videos? I literally have a video on my channel that basically says the problem in Israel are the conservatives. And I go into that as well, where it says Hamas are the conservatives of the Palestinians. Likud and Netanyahu are the conservatives of Israel. And the United States conservatives just like to stir up the anthill. And that's the problem. So if you haven't watched my videos, there you go. We agree on that too. Perfect. Let's see. Russian-Israeli oligarchs are funding the campaign to strip Israel. Wow, I didn't realize it was the Russian oligarchs doing that. Interesting. Why won't fellow Muslims take in Palestinians like it? Well, here's the thing. Since 47 and 48, the entire Arabic world has been using the Palestinians as pawns in their quest to attack Jews, i.e. Israel. Because they don't like Israel, and they basically kicked all the Jews out of their own countries and forced them all to go into one little area, and then they've been trying to exterminate them ever since. They've been failing, but that's what they've been doing. So, because in 47 and 48, when 47 was created, and 48 when Israel defended itself, Israel fought back and successfully won, and then you had Gaza, and then you had the West Bank. Actually, I should do it. Gaza and then the West Bank, right? Because how you're looking at it. And the Jordan took over the West Bank, and Egypt took over Gaza. They never gave that land back. They took it. And when Israel took those lands, they didn't take them from the Palestinians. They took them from Jordan and Egypt. Why didn't Jordan and Egypt give those lands back to the Palestinians? And why did they hold on to the land for 20 years? Because they liked using the Palestinians as pawns in their attempts to try and destroy Israel. So Bibi is as evil as Trump. I don't even like the fact that he's now Bibi. Like, I'm like, when did he become Bibi? He was always Benjamin Netanyahu, or always called Netanyahu, like way for a long time. And then all of a sudden, like, he left power, then he came back, and he was Bibi. Like, it makes it's so cringe. Like, it's like an attempt to make him likable, and he's not likable. Netanyahu thought Putin was his friend. Yet when that happened, I was like, ugh, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? That's ridiculous. But now that we've been talking about Israel for a good bit, it's a good time for me to bring up this other thing I wanted to talk about. There's been a lot of talk about whether or not there should be a ceasefire. And I've said on this podcast before that I disagree with how Israel has been going after Hamas. I think there's been indiscriminate bombing. I don't like shutting off power and water, food access. There's been a lot of things that Israel has done that I disagree with. But here's a question about the ceasefire that I think everybody who is demanding a ceasefire needs to answer. If Israel right now said, fine, we have a ceasefire. We are going to pull all of our troops back. We are going to stop firing into Gaza. We're done. How long would it take for Hamas to return the hostages? Do you think they would return the hostages at all? When would you think that would happen? Be honest. Because I would really like to know your answer on that one. Because I don't believe Hamas would ever return the hostages. They have no reason to with a ceasefire because they've just won without doing anything. So tell me, all the people who are demanding a ceasefire, how do the hostages get back with a ceasefire? Who then gets the hostages back? How does Israel then get the hostages back with the ceasefire? With an end of all military operations? Tell me. I want to know. If you can't tell me, then how then does Israel go ahead and do that and get its citizens back without doing any military operations? It doesn't make any sense. It's unreasonable to tell Israel to do a ceasefire without giving them any other options. Now, it's reasonable to tell them to behave and work to limit civilian casualties as much as they can, while understanding that Hamas uses Palestinian people as human shields. And if you're unwilling to see that Hamas is using their own people as human shields, then you're also being unreasonable. But Israel has a responsibility to the citizens who are being held hostage. So, again, if you're calling for a ceasefire and they do a ceasefire, when do those hostages get returned? Because I don't see Hamas ever doing it at that point. Because Hamas will just say, we won. We don't have to give him back. So you tell me, when do they come back with a ceasefire? And Hamas, no ceasefire until Hamas lets hostages go. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I can't. I would love to see a ceasefire. I would love to see an end to cessation of all the hostilities. I would love to, and look, I have criticized Israel a lot of times on what they've done and how I feel that they've been indiscriminately bombing. And I don't think they've been as careful as they could have been, even with Hamas using human shields. But for everybody calling out for a ceasefire, And the reason I made that video is because I'm going to upload it to YouTube today or tonight, and it'll be live tomorrow. And then I'll also upload it to TikTok, and I'll have lots of people probably attacking me on TikTok for it. But one of the things, I know Hal hates TikTok. Again, my work, my full-time employer utilizes a security company to go over data security and other types of computer security, and the guy at the end of the expert at the end gives out his own TikTok channel when he to give more information. If you want more information on computer security, go check out my TikTok. So if this computer security guy is giving out his own TikTok channel, you know, I kind of gotta go with him on that one. But it's just a tool to me. To me, it's just a tool to use. I'm trying to use it to drive more people here, but I get a lot more engagement on TikTok than I do here. Like, I get a ton more engagement on TikTok than I do here. So why wouldn't I then post videos there as well? Now, I will take videos that I make on TikTok, like original videos that I make on TikTok. I will then post them back up here as well on the YouTube, because I use it as a tool also to make quick videos and put shorts up here on the YouTube, because again, it's a tool. So see, Putin loves the U.S. is distracted by Gaza, not focusing on Ukraine. How did Palestine know how to get into Israel like that? Feels like Donald's big fat mouth and Putin messed. Absolutely. Donald got Israeli intelligence. Donald told Russia when the Russian people there, and Donald said, I have every right to tell them whatever I want to tell them. Russia tells Iran and tells Hamas. Hamas then goes in and knows how to circumvent. They attack certain towers or whatever that would have warned them, and then boom, they paratroop in and kill a whole 1,400 Israeli citizens and others. And they're finding, they're finding AK-47s, Russian AK-47s, and other things from North Korea. This is all done, as I think was said on Hal's show, to destabilize everything. You know, they want to see this all destabilized. Even Netanyahu would probably love to see things destabilized a bit, because the less stable things are, the more likely he is to gain power, because he then gets to say, you need me in charge because I'm the one who's protecting you from them, from the bad people. And then Hamas again, it's gonna be like, you need me, you need us because we're protecting you from the bad people. Meanwhile, nobody's paying attention. And that's the other video that I made. The other video I made, which is that the Jewish people and Palestinian people need to stand together against oppressors, because in reality, you have people who forced the Jews into this one area, and the Palestinians are there, and they created this mess, this little quagmire, where they could just rile up the Hordestants every once in a while, make the Jews and the Palestinians fight, or get them to fight, so you don't pay any attention to the man behind the curtain. It's a nice distraction for something else going on in somewhere else in the world. So, anyhow, Bicycle Mike. It's Chinese malware. How is it Chinese malware, though? That's the thing. Malware has lots of different definitions. And malware can be as simple as something that is used to manipulate people. Malware can be something as difficult as gets into your system and does a whole bunch of bad stuff. From what I've seen, it's more of a, we're going to direct this stuff to you and show you content that we think that you want to see, or we want you to see, therefore we're going to try and manipulate you with the content that you see. If that's the form of the malware, then I'm not easily skewed or whatever, and I'm just going to use it as a tool. Good night, Steve. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate you. I'm probably heading off soon anyway. It's been 2 hours. as I said to Bill before he left, I think the kiddos are asleep now, just so I can go into more detail. Friday night, I'm leaving to go to Disney. So I will not be able to do a show on Monday or Wednesday of next week, or have my Twitch stream on Thursday. So we will be liberal Danless all next week. So I might post some videos. I might make a couple of videos here and there. But I will not have any live content, or if I do have live content, it'll be brief. Like, it's not going to be a full-on produced show with OBS and everything. I might pop on for a few minutes just to say hey, but most likely at this time, I'll be in a park or something. So, anywho. But I didn't want to be too loud about it because the kids don't know. We've kept it from them, even though there's been a thing that says how many days we're until vacation, and it's been right there in front of the TV, and they haven't noticed yet. So yeah. But you could always make up for the lost lack of time by watching old episodes. You can go watch the if you really want a good episode to watch to catch up on, there's the episode that I did 2 years ago, which is the living life as an obese person. Now, I would highly recommend, if you haven't seen that yet. Let's see if I can pull that one up real quick. Let's turn off the volume because I don't want it playing as I'm bringing it up. Your channel. Search. Oh, it's just living as a fat person, not as an obese person. So let's see. That one is probably one of my best episodes. It doesn't start like until the topic about, I think, the obesity doesn't start till about a half hour in or so. I think I talk about other stuff, but like I go for about a good 2.5 hours talking about me and my life as an obese person. So there's that. Anyway, I think it's about a good time to, now is the time to say goodbye to friends like you and me. MIC, see ya in a bunch of days. Anyway, KUIY, because I love you. MOUSE. So, anyway. And remember, if you haven't liked the video, like it, share videos with your friends, comment on videos, etc. Appreciate y'all for hanging around. So you said Politics Girl has an excellent episode of Toxic Masculinity. I have a whole bunch of videos on toxic masculinity as well. Check those out as well. There's a playlist, Unravelling Toxic Masculinity. Again, this is the end of this week's episode of, or today's episode of Liberal Dan Radio. Talk from the left, that's right. I'll be back in 12 or 13 days or so. Here's the Toxic Masculinity link. 12 or 13 days or so. With the next full episode of Liberal Dan Radio. If you live in Louisiana, go vote Saturday if you haven't done so already. Thank y'all very much for watching. Appreciate y'all. Have a great night. Appreciate y'all. Peace.